It's very common when my mom and I are together that people think that she is my sister. Now, of course, I can look at this one of two ways. The first way is obviously my mom looks very young and it's a compliment to her. But also, people might think, wow, Dan has got so much wisdom, like he must be older than he actually is. Now, interestingly enough, my mom taught me something recently. She's explaining that when you're going downstairs, when you're going down a hill or down a mountain, go heel first with your feet. So often there's a tendency to go toe first. Now, if you think about going down a very steep mountain, toe first could end up in quite a disaster. So heel first actually provides better stability, and actually it's easier on your legs. And Brother Body will thank you for this. We recognize as we walk through life, as we journey through life, that we can easily get addicted to the darknesses in our hearts, in our societies, in our families, and in our world. And yet Christmas is always a reminder to simply let the light in. In the first reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah, the people are in a pretty difficult place. They're being oppressed by the Syrians. There's a lot of darkness, and they are to welcome the light. Continue to welcome the light. Welcome the light of God into your heart. And then there's this great promise of this child who will be born for us, this son that will be given to us. Obviously, this is pointing to Jesus the Christ, because Jesus the Christ is the wonderful counselor. We can always turn to the Gospels for guidance in our lives. And as we read the Gospels, you recognize that we put these into practice not through our own merit or not through our own initiative, but by allowing God to act in us, with us, and through us. In other words, we are always a partner with God in carrying out the Gospels, in carrying out the good news of the love of God found in Jesus Christ. Now, the other thing is mighty God. So many times people dismiss God because why does God allow war? Why does God allow young people to die very young? But the thing is we're given the gift of free will. It's so that we can ultimately love God in return. God has to give us that freedom. And then the highest expression of this in human form is to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, we also recognize this isn't easy, but simply we have to receive this love into our hearts. We receive the light of Christ into our hearts so that we have this to give to others. And we don't know the battle that each of us is going through, so we ought to be kind always. But this mighty, mighty God is mighty through his death. The perseverance of Jesus the Christ to accept death on a cross, who was wrongfully accused, and accepted this, but ultimately to show that even the light, even love can break through this darkness. But of course, the story doesn't end with crucifixion. There is the everlasting Father. There is resurrection. In the here and now, we will be resurrected to new life. And we also have to hold firm when someone passes away that God desires for us to be with God forever in everlasting life. And this is not something we can merit. We can't even send one person with all our good deeds to heaven. Think about it. Eternal God, spending eternity with God. This has to be a grace that God gives us. And grace is gift. Simple gift. Isn't that part of what Christmas is about? Is gift giving to others, being generous with others, being mindful of others. And then we have the Prince of Peace. Pope Leo is encouraging us to have a 24-hour period of time of peace, especially in Ukraine and the Middle East. And let us continue to pray for peace. Let us continue to do our part of making the world a better place where we are at in the simplest and the humblest of ways. Now, in our gospel reading, we need this story. We need this story to hear it again and again and again. But, let's awaken to ourselves that Jesus was born in darkness, but he's also born into a place that's not exactly all that pleasant. And it wasn't easy, especially for Mary, obviously, and Joseph as well. And yet, Mary and Joseph recognize that they belong to God. And therefore, I'll let go of my own will to do the will of God. This is what they're doing. They didn't have an easy life, and we can always be inspired by both of them. But ultimately, we're inspired by Jesus, who chose to become a human being. Think about it. God chose to become a baby, helpless, dependent, poor. And Jesus chose a poor place to be born, a poor family to be born into, so that poor people and those who are very vulnerable in society can also have hope that God cares for you too. And really, as this is announced to shepherds, these are also poor people as well. These are people that no one of faith would expected would receive this good news. And so this emphasizes that as heaven and earth come together, let us remember that we never journey alone. God is within our hearts. God is among us in creation and in others. And this is what can help dispel the darknesses within our heart, so that we continue to hold firm to the hope of Christmas, that God is born among us.